Mark and I were that couple people stared at on the street, not just because of our looks, but because of a certain internal, almost physical harmony. I am Elena, a lead architect at a firm that designs modern museums. My life consists of clean lines, concrete, light, and space. Mark is a neurosurgeon, a man whose hands daily hold the thread between existence and nothingness. Our life in our Kiev apartment on Ritarska Street was a work of art. High ceilings, the smell of freshly ground Ethiopian coffee, the creak of expensive parquet under soft wool socks. Mark was my rock. When my first bouts of dizziness began 3 years ago, he didn't just support me, he became my entire world. "You don't need to go to public hospitals, Lanusia," he'd whisper, kissing my cold fingers. His lips were always dry and warm. "I'll find the best colleagues. We'll handle this. You're just overworked from the museum project." I remember that period as a warm fog. Mark would bring me breakfast in bed. Avocado toast, fresh juice, and a small white pill for vascular support. He would watch me swallow it, and his pupils would dilate almost imperceptibly, the reaction of a predator watching prey, which I then mistook for boundless care. We lived in a cocoon of safety. I stopped working because my hands began to shake. Mark said it was progressive neuropathy due to stress. He took over everything: finances, my medical appointments, even my communication with the outside world. I was grateful. God, how grateful I was that he didn't leave me when I turned into a shadow of myself. Mark would appear in a room before I even heard his footsteps. He wore only cashmere and expensive linen in navy or charcoal. He always smelled of sterility latex and a faint trail of Santal 33. That scent makes me nauseous now, but then it was the smell of salvation. His appearance was flawless. Sharp cheekbones that looked carved from ivory and eyes the color of cold Atlantic ice. When he spoke, he never raised his voice. His speech was therapeutic, soft, but with a structural steel underneath. One evening, I sat in my armchair, wrapped in a blanket. My legs had gone numb again. Mark entered, holding a glass of water and a new dose of medication. "Mark, I feel like these new pills are making the dizziness worse," I said softly, feeling my tongue become heavy, as if filled with lead. "Maybe we should get a second MRI at an independent center?" He stopped. The light from the desk lamp highlighted every wrinkle around his eyes. He didn't get angry. Oh no, Mark never got angry. He placed the glass on the table with a sound that made me flinch, a dry click of glass against marble. "Elena!" His voice dropped a tone, becoming velvety yet dangerous. "Are you starting this again? You know, your anxiety is part of the symptom. Do you not trust me? Your husband, who has saved hundreds of people from the very thing that is destroying you now." He stepped closer. I smelled his skin, cold, metallic. His hand rested on my neck, his thumb slowly stroking my carotid artery. I felt every beat of my heart under his finger. It was like a predator checking the pulse of its kill. "I see your pupils darting, darling. It's nystagmus. You're progressing, but not in the direction we want. If you go to another doctor, they'll just put you in a psych ward. Is that what you want? To be locked in a white room without me?" I felt a metallic taste in my mouth. It was fear, but I only nodded, swallowing the pill that felt like a piece of dry earth. My last hope was Inna, my younger sister. She was always the rebel, and I hoped her fresh eyes would see what I couldn't through the fog. She came over for dinner. I tried to whisper to her in the kitchen while Mark was uncorking the wine. "Inna, I'm scared. I find empty blister packs of medications that aren't in my prescription. I think he's giving me something else. Help me get out of here. Take me to Mom's." Inna looked at me, and in her eyes I saw not sympathy, but irritation mixed with pity. She set down her glass. "Elena, stop. Mark just showed me your latest labs. You realize your brain isn't working quite right now, don't you?" He said you might have hallucinations and paranoia due to neuroinflammation. At that moment, Mark entered the kitchen. He softly put his hands on Ina's shoulders, and I saw her relax under his touch. Is she talking about conspiracies again? Mark smiled sadly. His voice trembled with feigned pain. This is the hardest part of my job. Seeing the woman I love view me as the enemy. Ina, thank you for being here. It's hard to handle this alone. Ina placed her hand over his. Mark, you're a saint. Elena, pull yourself together. You should be grateful he hasn't committed you to a clinic yet. You're acting like a madwoman. I stood in the middle of my perfect kitchen and felt the walls closing in. My sister, the only person I trusted, was now looking at me through Mark's eyes. She had become a part of him. I was isolated. That night, when they thought I had fallen asleep after another dose of vitamins, which I managed to spit into a napkin for the first time, I heard their laughter in the living room. Then, the creak of the leather sofa and Mark's lowered voice. One more month, Ina. Her body is already exhausted. Legally, everything is ready. She signed the power of attorney herself while she was in the fog. Soon, you'll be able to move in here for good. I lay motionless, digging my nails into my palms so hard I felt the warm moisture of blood. The metallic taste returned, but this time it wasn't fear. It was rage. I didn't swallow his pills for a week. For a week, I mimicked the motion of swallowing, hiding the white death under my tongue and later spitting it into the hollow leg of our antique bed. The fog in my head began to clear, but it was replaced by a chilling, razor-sharp terror. Without the drugs, my body began to break. Muscles cramped, and capillaries constantly burst in my eyes. But for the first time in 2 years, I began to see. Mark acted methodically. I noticed my phone became heavy, not physically, but software-wise. Every time I tried to log into my banking app, the screen would turn gray for a split second. He had installed mirror tracking. Every message, every Google search, like thallium poisoning symptoms, was mirrored to his Apple Watch. The finances were worse. I tried to withdraw cash while he was on shift, but the card was blocked for security reasons by the trustee. He had officially become my guardian, using my signature on insurance documents I had signed 6 months ago when I could barely focus my eyes. He began changing the locks. Not crudely, no. Darling, I've installed a smart home system, he said, adjusting his perfectly starched cuffs. Now the door only opens via my Face ID or my phone. It's for your safety. Remember how you forgot you wanted to walk onto the balcony barefoot last week? I hadn't forgotten. I hadn't gone to the balcony at all. It was gaslighting of the highest caliber. It happened on Thursday. I was in the living room, trying not to show that my hands had stopped shaking. Mark came home early. He hadn't taken off his surgical scrubs under his coat, meaning he wanted to project authority. He smelled of disinfectant and something sweet, the cookies my sister makes. Elena, why didn't you eat your lunch? He asked, standing over me. His tall frame's shadow completely covered my chair. I wasn't hungry, Mark. I think I'm getting better. Maybe we should try reducing the dosage. He slowly knelt in front of me. It was meant to be a posture of care, but I saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. His fingers, thin and strong, rested on my wrist, feeling for a pulse. You aren't getting better, he said quietly, almost tenderly. His pupils were narrow, like a reptile's. Your pulse is rapid. That's tachycardia lanusia, a sign that the toxins in your brain are active again. No, Mark, my pulse is rapid because I am afraid of you. The room became so quiet I could hear the coffee machine running in the neighbor's apartment. Mark didn't blink. He slowly released my hand and wiped his fingers on his trousers as if he'd touched something filthy. Afraid? He gave a short, dry laugh. It was the sound of dry leaves snapping. That's called Anosognosia, darling. Denial of illness. A typical symptom of your condition. You think I'm the enemy because I am the only obstacle between you and your madness. I heard you, Elena. I spat out, feeling sweat trickle down my spine. I know about the apartment. I know about the legal readiness. Mark stood up. His face changed. The soft mask of the caring doctor slid off, revealing something sharp and cold. He walked to the window and closed the curtains, plunging the room into semi-darkness. You know what your problem is, Elena? You always thought you were the smartest, the architect, the creator of worlds, but you are just a biological object with faulty brain chemistry. Inna gives me what you never could, peace. She doesn't ask questions. She just admires. He turned back to me, and in his hand I saw a syringe. He'd pulled it from his pocket as casually as if it were a pen. You missed your morning dose. We'll fix that now. You'll just sleep. And when you wake up, you'll forget these silly conversations with Inna. It was just a nightmare. I pressed myself into the chair, feeling the metallic taste fill my mouth. If you do that, I will scream so loud the whole building will hear. Elena, he sighed with feigned pity. Who would believe a woman with an official diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia secondary to CNS degeneration? All the neighbors know you're sick. I've spent 6 months paving the way. I've complained to them in the elevator about your nightly hysterics. They'll only pity me when they hear your screams. He didn't inject me. An urgent call from the clinic, an emergency surgery, saved me. He simply locked me in the bedroom, checking the lock 3 times. Rest. I'll be back in 2 hours, and we'll finish the procedure. I knew I had very little time. I started searching. Not in the closets. Not under the bed. Mark was too smart for that. I remembered how he always placed his heavy leather briefcase on one specific tile in his study. The tile under his oak desk had a slightly different grout color. Using a metal nail file, I pried the edge, breaking my nails until they bled. Under the marble slab was a small safe. The code. What could it be? Our wedding anniversary? No. His birthday? No. I entered 0-0-0-0. It worked. His arrogance was his weakness. He was certain I'd never leave the bed. Inside lay a folder with my name. I began to flip through it, and my heart nearly leapt out of my chest. There were my daily charts. Temperature, pupil dilation, degree of hand tremors after each dose. He was experimenting on me. He was administering low doses of digoxin combined with neuroleptics to simulate heart failure and a mental breakdown. But at the very bottom lay a sheet that made the world turn black. It was a blank death certificate. My name, Elena Iorivna Levitska. The date of death was blank, but the cause was already filled in. Sudden cardiac arrest due to chronic illness. The doctor's signature was already there. His colleague, Dr. Voretsky, whose name I'd heard during their shared dinners. Next to it was another document, a contract selling my share in the architecture firm, signed by me. The signature was a perfect forgery, done by his hand. And a will, where all my property passed to him, and the guardian in case of incapacity, Inna. Suddenly, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. The click of the front door. The smart home greeted its master. Welcome home, Dr. Levitsky. He was back early, and I was sitting on the floor of his study with my own death certificate in my hands. I was on my knees in front of the open safe when the study door opened. I didn't have time to hide the papers. Mark froze in the doorway. The hallway light hit his face, splitting it in half. One half the perfect doctor, the other a shadow. He didn't shout. He simply closed the door behind him and turned the key. The sound of metal clicking into the slot was louder than a gunshot. I told you not to get up, Elena. His voice was completely hollow, devoid of inflection. It was the voice of the abyss. You're breaking protocol." He walked slowly toward me. I saw his chest rise and fall, deep, controlled breaths. He was preparing for physical labor. I clutched the folder to my chest, so hard the paper crunched. "This is my death certificate, Mark. You've already buried me." He stopped to step away from me. I smelled his sweat breaking through the expensive perfume, a sour scent of fear and arousal. "You're already dead, darling. Your brain has degraded. You aren't an architect. You are a vegetable I am keeping alive. This paper is just a formality to end your suffering and the burden on Inna and me. You should thank me for my mercy." He lunged at me suddenly. I didn't expect such animal strength from a man who holds a scalpel. He knocked me off my feet. My shoulder hit the corner of the desk, and a sharp flash of pain blinded me. He pinned me down, his knee pressing into my diaphragm, squeezing the air out. His hands, those golden hands of a neurosurgeon, closed around my throat. His face was right there. I saw the dilated pores on his nose, the red veins in his icy eyes. He wasn't calm. He was enjoying this. "Just relax," he hissed, his saliva splashing onto my cheek. "It's quick. Heart failure. Varetsky has already signed everything." I was dying. The fog he'd created with pills was returning due to the lack of oxygen. But at the last second, my gaze fell on his hand. On his ring finger was our wedding band. Platinum, heavy. I gathered all the rage that had accumulated over 2 years and bit into the flesh of his palm, near the thumb. I tasted salty blood and clenched my jaws until I heard a crunch. He screamed, not like a man, but like a wounded beast. His grip loosened for a second. That was enough. I slammed my knee into his groin, slipped out from under him, grabbed the folder and a heavy marble statuette from his desk. As he tried to stand, I swung the statuette with everything I had into his head. The dull thud of stone against skull. He fell. I didn't check if he was breathing. I ran, barefoot. In my pajamas, the folder pressed to my chest, I sprinted out of the apartment, leaving bloody footprints on the perfect parquet. The smart home wouldn't have let me out, but I smashed the control panel by the door with the same statuette, and the lock emergency released. I knew where I had to go. Tonight was my architecture firm's anniversary gala. Everyone was there. Inna was there. Varetsky was there. My life, which they had stolen, was there. I burst into the Intercontinental Hotel ballroom like a ghost. In silk pajamas stained with Mark's blood, hair disheveled, eyes wild. The music stopped. Hundreds of people in tuxedos and evening gowns turned toward me. Among them, I saw Inna, in my favorite emerald dress, with my husband on her arm. Mark was there. He had managed to arrive earlier, his head bandaged, telling everyone about my episode. "Elena!" Inna rushed toward me, playing the role of the concerned sister. "My God, Mark, call an ambulance. She's having a psychosis again. She's hurt herself." Mark stood pale, his eyes darting around the room, gauging the exits. "Don't go near her. She's dangerous," his voice trembled. "It's tachycardia and hallucinations." I walked to the center of the hall. My legs shook not from illness, but from adrenaline. I held the folder high above my head. "I am not sick." My voice cracked into a scream, raspy and terrifying. "I am poisoned. My husband, the great Dr. Levitsky, has been drugging me for 2 years with digoxin and neuroleptics to turn me into a vegetable and take my money." I hurled the folder onto the nearest table, right into the champagne glasses. Papers scattered. "Look, a death certificate signed by Dr. Varetsky while I am still alive. Dosage charts for the poison. I will leaving everything to Inna and Mark." My former business partner, a distinguished senior architect, picked up the death certificate. He looked at the date, the signature, then at Varetsky, who stood by the buffet trying to become invisible. "Varetsky, is this true? You signed this." Varetsky turned white, and began backing toward the exit. It's a mistake. I didn't know. Mark said it was for insurance. Mark realized it was over. The caring husband mask shattered. He turned into what he truly was, a pathetic, cornered rat. She's lying. She's insane. You believe this hysteric? I was saving her, he screamed, spitting, his perfect suit suddenly appearing too large for him. I looked at Elena. She stood frozen, staring at the papers on the table. She picked up a dosage chart. Elena, I said quietly, but in the silence of the hall, it sounded like a sentence. You were next. He only wanted the money and total control. Do you think he loved you? You were just a convenient replacement while I was dying. Elena looked up at Mark. There was no more adoration in her eyes, only the horror of realizing her own insignificance in his game. Mark, you said she wanted to die herself. You said. Someone called the police. I stood in the middle of the hall barefoot, covered in someone else's blood, and for the first time in 2 years I breathed deeply, even though every rib ached. Epilogue. 6 months later. I live in a rented apartment on the other side of the Dnipro. No high ceilings or designer furniture here. It smells of old books and cheap coffee, but it's the smell of freedom. Mark is in pretrial detention. The trial is ongoing. His lawyers are trying to prove insanity based on the head trauma I gave him. His grandeur is gone. At the last hearing, he cried, accusing me of provoking him with my coldness and careerism. The sight only made me nauseous. Dr. Varetsky took his own life a week after the gala. My health hasn't fully returned. The digoxin damaged my kidneys. I have chronic arrhythmia. My hands still shake sometimes, especially when I smell hospitals or disinfectants. I can no longer design. My fine motor skills are permanently impaired. I work as a consultant, but others do the drafting for me. Elena and I don't speak. She tried to come over, crying at my door, swearing he manipulated her. Maybe he did, but I will never forget the way she looked at me when I begged for help, as if I were a nuisance in the way of her happiness with my executioner. She's in therapy, but I am not ready to forgive her. Perhaps I never will be. I often wake up at night with the phantom sensation of his fingers on my neck, checking my pulse. I check the locks 3 times before bed. I only drink water from sealed bottles. I survived. I won. But the woman I was before Mark, the successful, trusting, vibrant architect, died in that apartment on Ritarska, and her death certificate, in the end, turned out to be real.